welcome back to Above the Noise, our podcast on faith, race, and reconciliation. Today, my guest is Jim Koppel, and you're going to enjoy this episode. We have a number of things to talk about. Jim and his wife are co-founders of SAI Incorporated, a private consultancy company, and also of the Freedom Fast, among other things. And as we get into the topic today, we're going to talk about those things. So, Jim, welcome to the program.
Grantley, thanks for having us. We're very excited to be a part of this.
Tell us a little bit about you and your family, what you do, so that people, our audience, can get to know you, Jim.
Great. Well, I was born in Kansas City, moved to Seattle, Washington when I was 16 years old. I always had an interest in history and in politics. I went to college in Boston, the Eastern Nazarene College, and then Boston College. And I went to Nazarene Theological Seminary as well. But in all those educational experiences, I was involved in our local community. I have a strong emphasis or concern about social justice issues. And I evolved into having been a college professor to a public high school teacher in Garden City, Kansas, and Wichita, Kansas. And in Wichita, I took kind of a major shift. We had a major youth gang violence problem in the Midwest. Gangs were involved in a lot of activity on Interstate 35, moving from Texas up to Minnesota, and Wichita was on Interstate 35. And my superintendent of schools walked into my office one day and said, "Substance abuse and youth violence is increasing in this district, fix it." And so I wound up organizing a coalition of prevention, treatment, law enforcement, community activists. And we got a lot of national attention with the projects that we were doing. And from that experience of 3 years, 18 months of that, I rode with our gang unit doing street interventions 4 nights a week in Wichita. The gangs gave me a street name. It was Clipboard, which wasn't the most macho title, but nonetheless, it reflected that I was always carrying a clipboard, interviewing these gang kids about what was going on. And they got a lot of national attention. Time magazine, Rolling Stone magazine wrote articles on what we were doing. I was invited to move to Washington, D.C. By President George H.W. Bush. At the last 6 months of his term, the President's Drug Advisory Council, to start a new organization called Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America. And while I was there, I wrote the Drug-Free Communities Act, which has put close to $2 billion in local communities dealing with substance use and focusing on prevention and treatment. Then I went to the National Crime Prevention Council. I worked on youth violence and substance use. And then Colleen and I decided to start our own firm, which is Strategic Applications International, and Servant Forge, which is our nonprofit that works in East Africa and works in a number of communities in the United States. While there, I was at the Strategic Applications International. We were asked by the Department of Justice to facilitate President Obama's task force on 21st century policing, which came about 10 years ago after a lot of police shootings, particularly the Ferguson incident. And so we facilitated that task force, issued 52 recommendations that went out to the country. And it had a major impact on the way police reform and the way policing conduct their relationships with the community. 5 years ago, after the murder of George Floyd, we were asked by John Bridgeland, who was then the chief domestic policy advisor for George W. Bush, or had been Bush's chief domestic policy advisor, why are we still shooting people of color? And we started an initiative called Act Now. I wanted to listen to people. I wanted to go into neighborhoods and parts of the country that are not normally invited to the table to talk about police-community relationships. And Colleen and I set up these listening sessions. We've listened to over 20,000 people in the last 5 years and over 1,400 line officers, rank and file officers. And last fall, we issued a report called Report to the Nation, Youth Deflection and Community Safety, keeping young people out of the criminal justice system.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the work that you've done there. In the initiative with Act Now and that question about, why are we shooting people of color in this country? What are some of the things that you found out, some of the things that you learned in that study?
The probably the most significant thing was youth employment. Kids are at great risk. A longitudinal study on youth development that was done, a 20-year longitudinal study, showed that if kids have hope, young people have hope, something that pulls them into the future. You can use the word faith, something that gives them a reason to get up in the morning. If they have significant adults in their lives, if they have acquired skills, I don't care if it's academic, if it's music, if it's sports, something that they can celebrate. Fourth is locus of control, where they feel like they have a voice in shaping their own future. And then fifth, or lastly, was altruism, an opportunity to give something back. But behind all of that, we discovered that youth that are gainfully employed or have the opportunity for employed are less likely to be involved in youth violence, substance abuse. Rates of teenage pregnancy fall significantly. It's a protective factor. And so probably the key learning that we had was developing skills, something that young people can engage in and find meaningful employment. And so, quite frankly, in our Act Now project, we're in our third round of funding from Walmart Foundation, is that we're focusing heavily on youth employment to keep young people out of the criminal justice system.
Okay. So that focuses on the young people and helping them have purpose and hope, and getting back to the saying that anything about us should include us in order to find solutions, that altruism and being involved. But what did you find out about when you did the policing study about why are there so many negative interactions between police and people of color?
Training, and Brian Stevenson, who is one of the members of the Task Force on 21st Century Policing and have the Equal Justice Institute in Montgomery, Alabama, wrote a book called Just Mercy. And in fact, there was a movie based on his life and the work he had done. He talks about the concept of proximity, that if you create relationships and you really begin to listen and engage people, you have a greater chance of influencing outcomes of behavior. And so figuring out ways in which police could have proactive conversations with the community, and the community also having proactive conversations with the police. And so being present, listening. And a big part of that was training and focusing on building the capacity of law enforcement to better understand and to work with the community, to understand the cultural distinctions that often take place in some of these communities, to better appreciate the forces or influences of poverty and the things that put people at risk. And those voices, quite frankly, and the discussions around police reform for the last 20 years or longer have been, it's usually the usual suspects that get invited to the table, the normal organizations. And it seldom reaches into the neighborhoods where communities feel either they're over-policed or under-policed, depending on the neighborhood and the environment. So looking at policies and procedures to get police out of their cars and into the neighborhoods so that they're listening and talking to people, you have less likely of a chance. And we're seeing that, quite frankly, Grantley, today in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. The Minneapolis Police Department, since George Floyd, has focused heavily on de-escalation, also on what it means to really, what they call sanctity of life. In any kind of encounter, everybody goes home at night. And so to be able to de-escalate, generally most violent confrontations between police and communities is something that could have been deferred, and by just simply stepping back and slowing down. And quite frankly, what we're seeing is a difference in training between the Minneapolis Police Department and ICE. It's a difference in the length of training and also the content or the quality of training. It's a big deal. So
yeah, it is a big deal. I mean, we're seeing
right,
lots of unrest, lots of people in the street. And just this weekend, we had another person
Yeah.
killed by ICE on the street.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of questions about that and how their reaction and the use of force there. It's interesting that you found things about training and proximity, because if you go back in this podcast, I've had 2 interviews with a police chief of Kent, Washington, and I asked him the same question, and he also came up with the same answer, 2 of the same answers. I'm sure your study has a lot more in it, and obviously in a podcast that's not dedicated to the study, we're not going to get to all of them. But he found that proximity and training was also influencing his department. So one of the things that he did was he now requires that any recruit that gets accepted into that police department must do an internship with a community nonprofit before they go to the academy. That puts them in the community where they have to go out and interact with people in the community. Otherwise, he will not accept them in his police department. They actually have to do that.
That's
And
great.
what he's found is that many of the officers are coming back with a completely different view of the community.
It's brilliant, and that's exactly the kind of thing that needs to be happening, and a number of departments are doing similar things. It's interesting, in Portland, Oregon, there's a program called Talk a Mile, and where police recruits literally are matched up with young people, high school age. They literally walk a mile, and there are facilitated questions where they get to know each other. And in the course of getting to know each other, the response of the recruits has been amazing about what they discovered, what they learned and appreciated about a lot of the conditions, the social determinants of health, we call it. It's those various things that influence certain kinds of environments that contribute to crime, violence, poor health, substance abuse, etc. So, yeah, that's a great strategy to require that.
Yeah, it's been working very well.
Yeah.
One of his comments to me was that at first people were resistant to it, and many of the other police chiefs were resistant to it in the area, because they have their regional police chiefs associations. And now that he's done it, many of the other departments are beginning to implement it because they see the results of how the officers are coming back and saying different things about the community. And one of the things he said, which also ties to Minneapolis and what's going on there with ICE, is that some of them work with refugee resettlement agencies. And he was talking about some of the officers who went in the middle of the night, 2, 3 in the morning, to welcome refugees and their families into the country at the airport, and take them to the hotel for the night, and then work with them to get housing, get to know the kids. And then when they got to be police officers, they would see the same kids on the street, and the kids would see them, and it was more of a, oh yeah, hi officer, how you doing, that kind of stuff, more than being afraid of them.
Yeah.
Because the other thing that we found, and I don't know if you found this in your study, was people coming to in the United States and in most Western countries, police are seen as friendly, as people you can talk to, people there to help you, even though some communities don't see that, right? But overall, many in the communities of color still see that, like you talk about over-policing, but most people see it as positive. And lots of people who come to the United States are coming from countries, especially refugees and asylum seekers, where police are not seen as your friend.
That's right. Yeah,
so
we've
it's
done
a
a lot of
different
work
cultural context.
Yeah. We've done a lot of work in Kenya where police are feared. When they migrate to the United States and they see a different attitude or a different approach, it's a cultural conflict and difference in the way people respond. And for officers to understand that and to begin to appreciate it changes the way they engage, or at least it should change the way they engage immigrant populations.
Yeah, and that's the whole purpose of that, to see that and to understand that. And then the language barriers, right? Understanding that you may need to call for somebody to help with translation. And one of the things we spoke about was, that negative interaction at first. The person may not necessarily be resisting or angry. They may be trying to tell you, I don't understand.
Well, it's interesting.
but they can't express it.
I, I have to tell you, years ago, we did a project in King County, and we interviewed 127 different people, and it was over the King County Sheriff's Department use of force. And at that time, Sheriff Reichert, who then became Congressman Reichert, asked us to come in and figure out what was going on. And one of the things we discovered, and it was a story I'll never forget, a woman said that her father, who was an immigrant, had been involved in a car accident, and it was clearly the fault of the other person. But because her father couldn't speak English, the report was taken by the police officer of the English-speaking person, who was the guy it was his fault. The voice of her father was completely left out of the discussion. And when that happens, the inequities that are associated with that, just that language barrier, can be significant unless police have been trained to understand what's going on here. You know, we can understand the guy who committed the offense, but we can't understand the person who's the victim. And it changes the way they respond. And training addresses that issue, or at least it should.
On this topic, you said that you made recommendations to the 21st century policing and for the Obama administration. How many of those recommendations were accepted or implemented, or do you know that?
Well, it's difficult to measure. The one thing it did do is there, and probably even still today, there isn't a chief that is hired in this country that is not asked to take a look at the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. It had 57 actual recommendations, and that they would be familiar with them in terms of the sections on trust, on technology, on community, on training, all those different categories. And so they was an understanding or an appreciation that they would not be considered unless they were familiar with that task force report. And so various departments implemented things immediately. Other departments, it's taken a while. We have 800,000 law enforcement officers in this country and 18,000 law enforcement agencies. And most departments, about 70% of the departments, maybe 80%, are less than 100 officers. And so you got a lot of rural and smaller departments. I'm confident that the International Association of the Directors of Law Enforcement Standards and Training and the 670 academies, police academies in this country, they train around the President's Task Force, those recommendations.
You also spoke about community policing. What is your definition of community policing, and how did the report or your studies show that's the best way to do community policing?
Where communities are engaged in the policing process. That is, they're also involved in hiring, where they're involved in budget development and where policing are being deployed. But it's also understanding your neighborhood and the businesses, the faith communities, understanding the people that you're working with in policing. I mean, it's a small thing like in our gang work, our gang unit wore soft uniforms, polo shirts and slacks. They didn't wear the hard uniforms or all the utility belts that were on, because it automatically suggested confrontation. Mm-hmm. And so just small things and steps like that where the community is engaged, but where police is listening to the community to help shape the kind of policing that neighborhood wants and needs.
Excuse me for one moment while I take the time to tell you about my new website, GrantleyMartelli.com. Here you will find links to all my podcasts, both audio and video versions, and other things that I do. So check it out, GrantleyMartelli.com. That's Grantley with a Y and Martelli with a Y. And continue to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Now let's get back to the program. So let's change the topic a little bit and get now to the other thing that you did, the other work that you do. By the way, I really appreciate you doing that work. I find it fascinating that you get to do that kind of work and to be in the communities. And dealing with these tough topics, it seems to me that your business, SAI, is involved in getting people to learn to have tough conversations in a positive way. Is that correct?
Very much so. Yeah. Yeah, very much so. I mean, we kind of say that we come alongside communities to help develop their capacity to generate resources to address a mission, and that mission is very much anchored in building relationships. I don't care what it is, if it's policing, education, public health issues, poverty eradication. It's about how you understand and work alongside your community. And so last spring, I was looking or realizing that we were approaching the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, recognizing that the Declaration of Independence wasn't for everybody. It wasn't for people of color, particularly slaves, Native Americans, or women. But the Constitution that came along about 11 years later talked about creating a more perfect union. And so we have been doing that over the past 250 years to address some of those issues. The other thing I realized that was part of my background, as I was trained as a minister. I went to seminary. I was ordained in the Church of the Nazarene. And I was curious about, as a historian, which my doctoral work is in history, about the role of faith in the creation of our republic. And I'm not talking about a specific faith, because the reality it was that it was very pluralistic. In fact, there was a significant debate in the First Continental Congress as to even whether or not the Continental Congress, which produced the Declaration of Independence, should even be opened with prayer or not. They finally concluded that it could be, and then they eventually hired the person who did that prayer to be the chaplain of the Continental Congress. That Continental Congress, I discovered, had 2 fasts where they literally paused to reflect and made a sacrificial gesture to work toward a common good. And fasting became part of the DNA that helped shape this country. Washington, during the Revolution, called for a fast. Eventually, Lincoln called for 3 fasts and 4 days of Thanksgiving during the Civil War. Fasting as an act to sacrifice something for a greater good, to pause, to relate in dialogue, and then to serve were critically important. And I thought, what would it take for us as a nation today in 2026, as we approach the commemoration of the 250th anniversary, if we reinstituted, if the diverse religious traditions. In fact, 16 of the world's major religions have fasting as part of their tradition or practice. That what if we all paused out of e pluribus unum, out of many one, where all the many different faiths and traditions pause, relate, and begin to dialogue, and then find a way in which to serve together. That it might change the way we do our dialogue. And we're so polarized as a country that recognizing ways in which we could come together. We don't all have to agree on everything, but there should be in a democracy an opportunity for safe and civil discourse. And that's what the Freedom Fast is about. We're mobilizing communities, colleges, workplaces, to begin thinking about how a fast could work or apply to them in their community. That's it at the heart of what we're trying to do in this project.
And it's called the Freedom Fast.
The Freedom Fast. And you can get more information.
That's a little bit more about it.
Yeah, the Freedom. You can get more information at thefreedomfast.us, our website. And it kind of gives you ideas. If you sign up and indicate, well, one of the things that we're doing, Grantley, is we're having 6 days of fasting on the 4th of every month leading up to the 4th of July. Yeah. And we're calling on communities, faith communities of all different backgrounds to pause that day to do something. It could be a fast from social media. It could be a fast from whatever a priority is in your life that you would like to give up as a sacrifice temporarily in order to pause and reflect on the values that shaped us as a country and on the values we need to capture, again, in order to go forward for the next 250 years. A call for people to slow down and talk to each other and listen to each other. Listening itself is a form of fasting. where we sacrifice a bit of our time and our effort to listen to somebody's concerns or issues. And I'm convinced that proximity, and in that context of proximity, listening to people is something critically important. I mean, I'm going to a place tonight, in fact, that I know there are differing political views, differing views of religion, etc. And it could be combative, it could be confrontational. But I discover in those situations, if I go in prepared to listen first, I don't have to win an argument. It's a healing experience.
As you're doing the Freedom Fast, you said it's the 6 days, one per month, leading up to the 4th of July.
Yeah.
Is this going to be centrally coordinated through the website, or are you asking people to do it in their local communities or churches? Or tell us a little bit about the logistics of how you want people to execute the Freedom Fast.
It's a little bit of both. We're asking people to sign up or register, and then to do what's appropriate for their community and their organization, their family, their group. We've had several families sign up that have committed on February 4th. They're going to pause and they're going to fast that day and then have a conversation about the values and principles that the Declaration of Independence promised this nation of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They will then tell us what they did, and they'll report back to us in their conversation. What we hope to do is other communities, and other organizations sign up, that we get model programs that people can replicate and we could share and interact. We want to capture the information as best as we can so that we can share it and encourage others, because I'm convinced that this is going to go beyond July 4th, 2026, that communities will find a way to continue the conversation, or organizations will find a way to have these conversations in the workplace and elsewhere. That the Freedom Fast becomes a place where you can go on our website and find ideas and think about what it is to pause, to relate and dialogue, and then to serve. And if we can move the needle on the getting beyond the polarization, a technology that we're using in this project, using AI technology, is capturing some of these conversations and letting AI generate a report that creates visualization or symbology, pictures or images of the conversation that people can relate to. It's an interesting new way to do facilitation, and we think we've got some evidence that it really produces better dialogue. So.
Is there like a handbook that people can have access to, and printed ideas that they can get access to, and how do they get access to those?
You register on the website and you'll get a guide on what you can do for the 6 days of fasting and other activities that you could do throughout. And so the guidebook gives you specific content and strategies for implementing the Freedom Fast.
Do you have to be a pastor or a leader or a community leader to do this, or anyone can do it at any level?
Anyone can do it, and we hope anyone does it, and everyone does it. We hope pastors do. We hope organizations get engaged and understand it. Workplaces, we have several companies that are going to do it and have these conversations in the workplace, where difficult conversations can sometimes take place and produce conflict. But we're hoping individuals sign up. In fact, I saw something yesterday. 2 people had signed up that are doing it just personally. You know, I don't belong to a family or organization, but I am going to do this. I want to figure out a better way to communicate and to understand my neighbor and my friends who I may differ with. So.
And it seems to me then that if companies are doing it and small groups are doing it, like couples or 2 or 3 people, it is not necessarily asking then for a religious fast. I mean, it can be religious if you choose to do it to your church, but if you are not affiliated, you can still do it like in a corporate setting.
Fasting, it's interesting. Fasting has become a health thing as well. There are a lot of people who have no religious orientation or affiliation who do intermittent fasting to deal with their diabetes or their overweight, and to really use that time to pause and to reflect. and to think about your relationships from your family through your congregation or the place of worship. We had a Muslim leader reach out to us as well early on in our discussion about this and said that he was determined to not only fast, but also figure out ways to break the fast, which is part of Ramadan, and a big part of it, what we could do to celebrate together and to break the fast. In fact, on February 5th, the plan is we're going to have kind of a webinar on what you can do to break the fast, things that you could do to celebrate when you've come together as a group or as a congregation or however a religious organization or entity that wants to participate.
Yeah, Islam is really good at that through the
Yes.
Ramadan process, and then breaking the fast in the evening and having
Yes.
community,
Yeah.
then having Eid at the end of the fast. You know,
Yes.
they really have a good model for that community.
They absolutely do.
Community conversation that we can learn.
Yeah.
Those of us who are not of the Muslim faith,
Right.
we can
Well,
learn from them.
Yeah, we're working with Interfaith America, which is led by Ibu Patel, who is a Muslim leader, a Rhodes Scholar, who set up Interfaith Youth Corps, encouraging young people to volunteer across faith traditions and working collaboratively together to do service projects. And I'm finding as we do this, I come out of the Christian tradition. I'm a church historian. I understand church history and my own theology, etc. But I am excited about what I'm learning about different faith traditions, and that in this country, pluralism is the heart of who we are. And it's not by accident that in the Declaration of Independence it says we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. They didn't say we're endowed by Jesus. They didn't say we're endowed by God. They said by our Creator. However you want to fill that in. And the framers of the Constitution were very intentional about using language that all traditions. At the time of the Constitution, or the writing of the Declaration of Independence, where the colonies had about 3 million total population, there were about 2,000 Jews and a few scattered Muslims, plus the religious traditions of the indigenous populations that already lived here. And they wanted this declaration in its goal and the Constitution to be for all people.
So tell us then when the Freedom Fast starts in February and goes until July.
July for sure, and then probably beyond. We anticipate a number of activities to carry this on as people begin to reflect and think of the development of our Constitution. But we hope also in terms of them thinking locally. We're asking state legislatures to adopt resolutions supporting or endorsing the Freedom Fast. In fact, the state of Indiana will probably be the first state to do that.
That's very interesting. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
So if you want more information about the Freedom Fast, it's freedomfast.us.
TheFreedomFast.us.
Freedomfast.us.
Yeah.
And then your other company, SAI, how do people get a hold of you for that work?
It's sai-dc.com.
sai-dc.com.
Yeah.
So Jim, as we turn the corner here to head towards home, what are 3 things that you would like our audience to take away from this conversation?
That we have a great foundation as a nation. We need to rediscover the principles around which that foundation was built. And we need to find ways to dialogue, to engage in conversation. And the third is, I would put it this way, show up. Be present. It's interesting. I had a congregation in the church I attend yesterday about the fact that across the country, organized religion is seeing a complete breakdown. People are just not attending. And yet there's a quest or interest in spirituality. And so showing up in those conversations, being present in your neighborhood. There's an issue. I was sort of blown away this weekend looking at the thousands that turned out in demonstrations. And demonstrations and protests is one thing, but actually doing something in your community to drive change and to be a part of the change, it requires you to be present consistently and persistently. I'm a social activist and a social justice activist. I've participated in any number of demonstrations and been arrested several times in those course of those actions. And while some of it I believed did drive some change, today we've sort of gotten used to massive protests, but where's the action?
What happens after the protest?
Exactly.
What happens after the protest? What are you doing
Exactly.
afterwards? Go back home to your regular way of life, or do you go back home and engage with your community? You know, one of the things that I always think about, and I was thinking about this the other day as thinking about how to engage in community and people talking, like coming into my neighborhood. I don't know about yours, but you come into your neighborhood, and we live in a cul-de-sac, and we have 54 homes, and we try to know our neighbors well, and they have a lot of kids and different things. But what I find out is that unless you're intentional, it's easy to drive into your neighborhood, wave your hand at your neighbor, you know, open your garage door, drive in, you know, walk up there and hit close button, and you're in your house, right? And all we do then is just shake out our neighbor. But do we actually take the time to go out and have a conversation? How you doing? You know, talk about those conversations. Seems to me like we sort of built our communities around this isolation.
Precisely. Yeah.
You be friendly to be politically correct, but how do you then come out of the house on your front porch or wherever, or standing on the corner and actually have conversations with your neighbors and with people?
Or that it's often driven by crisis. A couple of months ago in our neighborhood, we had a 5-year-old girl at night walk out of their house, and the family was in panic. Nobody knew where she went. It was dark, and we live on a golf course, and there's some wooded areas close to it that could be threatening. And they put it on the Facebook page, and everybody turned out to look for her. And they were scouring, and they found her. She was safe, and she was okay. But it was amazing to see everybody turn out, and all of us kind of looked at each other and went, "We don't know each other." You know, the fact that it took a Facebook post to get us out of our houses looking for a 5-year-old child, you know, should tell us something. And so there's been a movement in our neighborhood to do things to bring people together, and to get people to show up, to be present.
Yeah, we've been trying to do that in our neighborhood too. You know, we have because we realized the same thing. We have the night out that we try to do together, get people together. Our neighborhood is pretty international and diverse, and some of the young people came to my wife and said, we would like to have an international dinner. Would you sponsor it? Would you? At that time, I was on the HOA Association, you know. Would you talk, HOA board, would you talk to your husband about sponsoring this? So she said, yeah. And we put it out there to our neighbors. And now every year we have this international dinner. We have a little park down there. Everybody brings a dish from their country, spend time together. But again, you have to be intentional, right? And every year the question comes up, are you going to do it again? Are you going to do it again? Right? And what we've realized is so easy for that to fall through the cracks.
Yes.
You know, I'm busy, you're busy, we go here, we go there. And then we lose touch with the community, you know, and some of those kids are getting married now and there are other kids. But I guess I'm saying this because in our modern society, it is easy to be isolated and to be in our own world. And the television and the computer screen becomes our world.
Yes.
But the people across the street from us, the people in our neighborhood, are we really getting to know them? Can we learn from them? Can we actually spend time together?
Yeah.
Compare that to when my wife and I love to travel, and lots of time in countries in the Caribbean and in some Asian countries and stuff, people sit outside in the afternoon, in the evenings, and talk to their neighbors, right?
Exactly.
And they're just talking, and it's a lot of times it's not constructed around, you know, a freedom fast or anything. It's just everyday conversations with people talking to each other. And sometimes I say, what can we do in our neighborhoods, even in our churches? You know, our pastor said 2 weeks ago, we need to get to know each other. We don't really know each other, even though we come to church together.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I've done a lot of work in Spain, and what I love about Spain at night, their dinners are late, about 9 or 10 o'clock at night. But before they go in for dinner, they're walking around the plaza. They're just outside walking. And one of the things that we're doing in the Freedom Fast is we're encouraging people to take pilgrimages, short pilgrimages. It may be a historical site in your community or a neighborhood where you walk together. That's part of what happened in Talk a Mile in Portland, is that people walked and talked. And that taking a pilgrimage, recognizing or honoring some historical place or some religious place. I mean, I have a place here in Utah that I love to hike to. And taking people with me on that hike and engaging in conversations. Pilgrimages are a great way to celebrate this Freedom Fast as one of the tools or things that we recommend in our guidebook.
Yeah. I appreciate that, because sometimes when we say show up, you know, people say, well, what do you mean by show up? But I like the conversation about, you know, ways that you can show up is having things in your community, talking to your neighbors, stay outside and talk to your neighbors, having community gatherings, like you said, walk a mile or do something together, take some person with you. And being present and listening to other people's stories is one of the things that I promote a lot on this podcast. Listen to other people's stories. We can learn from them.
Yes.
So showing up is not necessarily showing up for a meeting or for a protest. Those are things important too. Showing up at church is important, or showing up at your PTA is important. But also showing up for each other. And it doesn't have to be a formally organized showing up. It could be just that conversation at the mailbox.
Exactly. I'll tell you, Grantley, we're going to probably recruit you into the Freedom Fast to be one of our mentors. You've got great experience in a lot of this. And voices like yours are important to our process and to our project.
We have a tendency to make things too complicated.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
When I was trained in quality and performance management, one of the principles was don't complicate things that should remain simple.
Yes. Yes.
Keep it as simple as possible.
Exactly.
So you don't need an organization with flyers to talk to your neighbors. You just need to talk to your neighbor, right? The simplest form of it that we've learned. So Jim, anything else that you would like us to talk about before we?
No, I appreciate this opportunity, and we hope we get a lot of people to sign up and get engaged. There are a lot of people interested in what we're doing, and I'm excited. I've done a lot of travel and been involved in a lot of important projects, but I think this is one of the most important things I've ever done, and I'm excited about getting people engaged. So.
I'm glad that you took the challenge to do it and that you stepped up and had the courage to do it and put it out there. And maybe this will begin a national tradition, international tradition that people will begin to follow. So thank you for coming with us today and sharing with us on Above the Noise.
Okay,
thank you for being our guest.
Glad to do it.